Hello, welcome to Inside the Toon, the show where we take a deep dive into all things Newcastle United. I'm your host, Shaun Custis, and joining me is fellow Newcastle fan and journalist Jack Cunningham. Main thing on everyone's minds is, of course, Newcastle's loss to Man United on Boxing Day. Jack, let's get straight into it. How are you feeling?
It was exactly what I feared it was going to be after the Chelsea performance, which was so good and so positive and so aggressive and so full of energy. And I just was like, that was why I was really annoyed when we didn't get the win, because I was like, I know what's going to happen now. We're going to rock up to Old Trafford when they haven't got Bruno Fernandes, they haven't got all their AFCON players, and we're going to drop an absolutely useless performance. And it started so slow and lethargic, and I was screaming at the TV. I was so annoyed because I knew that this was what was going to happen, because you can't just go from hitting those such high levels to then totally dropping off. And it's exactly what happened. And look, yes, then the second half, totally dominated. But what did the goalkeeper have to do? What did Lamens actually have to do? Apart from, I think he made a really easy save from a Joe Linton shot that rolled straight at him. And there was a Joe Linton header that went straight at him as well. That was it. Yeah, loads of possession. Hall hit the crossbar. That was unlucky. But it wasn't a chance per se. A shot from the edge of the box, not necessarily a chance. We didn't create anything. Not really clear cut. So it was extremely disappointing, to be honest, Shaun. And it's just kind of sums up our season, whereby we go from the highs of a top performance to immediately just the lows of just a nothing display, really.
There was a lot of possession and very little sort of direct chances, wasn't there? And we talked before about how Newcastle can be very good at this sometimes, keeping the ball. It's all very, very nice, but the cutting edge seems to have disappeared.
Yeah, that's what it is. I think when we go behind, you almost kind of, this season, you almost kind of accept that we've lost. We've not picked up any points from losing positions this season. And then when you factor in the fact that we've then dropped 13 points from winning positions, it's a bad combination at this moment in time. Really, really struggling either when we take the lead or when we go behind. Look, again, that Manchester United team is not very good. It is not very good. I know going to Old Trafford's always been traditionally hard for Newcastle and what have you, but we did get that monkey off the back with the league win last season there. And they didn't have Bruno Fernandes. They didn't have their AFCON players. And I just think that it was there to be go there and win, put in a good performance, go there and win. They're pretty poor. I'm pretty sure Inside the Devils will say the same thing, that they were clinging on. They put everyone behind the ball in the second half, but ultimately it was just pretty bad crosses into the box the whole time. No real service for Waldemar. Gordon had a decent opportunity where we finally played some football around the edge of the box. He should have probably scored when he dragged it wide. And then there was another one where he fired it miles over the bar as well. And apart from that, there just wasn't anything to get excited about. It was loads of slow passing, loads of slow possession. And it just sort of felt inevitable from when they scored that first goal. It was like, well, I don't really know. I don't think I'm going to get back in this.
There's a lot of focus being on the wingers, hasn't there? I'm noticing a lot about on social media that's where the concentration is. Gordon's coming in for quite a lot of stick, very few chances created, no goals, etc. And he's struggling. There's no doubt about it.
He really is. Gordon is a player who we've spoke about a lot on this show. A lot of times we have given conversation to Anthony Gordon, and it seemed like for a moment it looked like he was getting back to his best a couple of weeks ago, but then the Sunderland performance, he was one of the worst players on the pitch. I know not many players can actually hold their head high with that one. Against Chelsea first half, he was electric. He was so good. This is the Anthony Gordon that we want to see. Cutting inside, delivering some brilliant crosses, got an assist, should have had another assist with the Waldemar chance for the hat-trick that he put wide. And then he turns up at Old Trafford, and he's against Dalot. I mean, he's pretty average, Dalot, to be honest. And I don't think he did enough. I don't think he did enough at all. And I think with his shots he had as well, should have almost certainly done better with those. I think that the one where Murphy played him in down the right-hand side and he dragged it wide, I would expect him to score that, to be honest, because the angle was decent. But he hasn't scored a non-penalty Premier League goal since January. He's scored penalties. Yeah, fair enough, and we need someone to stick away the penalties, fair play. But, we need more from him. It's as simple as that. I've said it numerous times, need more from him. Harvey Barnes, at the moment, for me, would be the man who should be starting, I think, because Barnes, it does create chances. He does score goals. He does deliver more. And Gordon is not doing that this moment in time. And it's a real annoyance for me, because this is a guy who starts for England and wants to be starting at the World Cup. You cannot start for England at the World Cup. You can't if you're delivering these sort of performances week in, week out that aren't good enough for your club. And he's right to expect more. I think we're all right to expect more from Gordon.
Let alone starting at the World Cup. I don't think he'll be going to the World Cup, to be honest, in the form he's in at the moment. I think you're a little bit harsh on Dallo, actually. He's been one of Man United's better players recently. But,
yeah, but that tells it all. That says it all. If he's one of their best players, that says it all, right? He's not very good. Man United fans have been complaining about him for a long time. They like that almost sums up where the state of the club is at, that he's one of their better players.
And they've got nothing up front either. Man U, so it wasn't like we had anything to worry about, really. I felt we could have got better on the front foot, and this is one of the criticisms of Eddie Howe, is that safety first, maybe he'd have been very, very happy to come away with a point. We might have accepted that. But if we've got any ambition, we need to actually be winning what is a bad Manchester United side. Actually, after Sunderland, I got quite enthused again. Carabao Cup made me feel a bit better when we beat Fulham. We were great, as you say, in the first half against Chelsea. Yeah, we got pegged back, but there was a lot to be excited about.
Absolutely, honestly, yeah. I mean, as you say, Manchester United have got nothing up front of it. It took Dorgu to score a goal. So
it's a good goal, though, to be fair.
It was a good goal. It was a good goal. I know. I saw some argument.
Ramsdale questions. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think once he gets a hand to it, you want him to save it. Equally, I do think it was a good strike, and I don't know. Sometimes he might be. I think we're maybe judging him a little bit harshly over it. He couldn't see it necessarily until the end either. I think the argument for Ramsdale one is once he gets a hand to it, you do want him to probably stop it. But then I felt sorry for Waldemar. I felt so sorry for Waldemar, because against Chelsea, Newcastle delivered the ball into him, and he had 3 chances to score a goal. He scored 2. He probably should have scored his first hat-trick, his first senior hat-trick it would have been. But, we have to create some opportunities for him. What on earth did he have to go off on Boxing Day? There was just nothing. And then then I thought maybe bring Visser on with him. I'd like to see them two play with him, but instead it was Waldemar came off. Visser came on.
But we don't seem to want to do that. We don't seem to want to play the two of them together up front, and it might be very old school, but could you go back to 4-4-2? Play the two of them up front and try that. Not many teams play it, but what about it? Yeah,
not many teams play a front two, but there are a few around Europe that do, and it works really well. I mean, I was watching Inter Milan last night, and Marcus Thuram and Lautaro Martinez. I'm not saying Visser and Waldemar are going to be like them, but they work it really well. There is a potential to do it. I would say it more a case of Waldemar would probably be a little bit deeper, and Visser would be up front. But I do think we should try at some point. I think there's a point of spending, over £100 million on 2 strikers if they're not going to both be involved in games regularly. I think that you're in a bit of a pickle there, to be fair. So for me, I feel like I would like to see them. And Burnley away, is that an opportunity to do it? Potentially. Maybe Bournemouth in the FA Cup is more so of an opportunity to do it. But at some point, the handbrake has got to be taken off away from home, because we've won once away from home.
You are missing the best excuse of them all, of course, is it was Boxing Day, and we never do well on Boxing Day.
No, our Boxing Day record is terrible. I saw that.
25 times in the Premier League we played on Boxing Day, and we've lost 16. So there you are. That's the real reason, isn't it, Jack?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we just blame it on Boxing Day. I mean, and don't get us wrong, our record at Old Trafford's not very good, but I just don't. Manchester United are not the team they used to be. Going to Old Trafford is not scary. It's not. Most teams turn up there and win these days. So it was disappointing for me that we didn't go there and win. Never mind draw. We should be going there and winning, to be honest.
You touched on them subs before, and there's a feeling recently that they're not really making an impact. You put, say, somebody like Willock comes on, who's struggled to get a first team place ever since he signed, and you don't think, ooh, Willock, he's going to change the game, do you?
Well, a few years ago, Willock was excellent. I think if we look back at when Newcastle finished 4th, Willock in the second half of the season was one of the best midfielders in the league for me in that second half of the season. That was absolutely unbelievable. His combination with Joe Linton was fantastic. his energy, his drive up the pitch. Unfortunately, since then, he's had 2 Achilles injuries, which have lost his pace and his drive. And he's not quite the same player. However, I will say, I don't think in the games that he's played this season, he has been anywhere close to one of our worst players on the pitch. I think that he can still do something, but you're also equally at the point where we're probably at the point, unfortunately, where if Newcastle are going to progress, we have to maybe say to a player like Willock, thank you, you've been an excellent servant, you've played a huge part in Newcastle becoming the team they are. If we're going to kick on and carry on, it's probably time for you to move on, unfortunately. And you can say that about quite a few of the players, I think, in the team these days. And Fabian Schär's getting on. Excellent servant, one of the best centre-backs.
I don't think he's playing that badly, Jack. I'm sorry, I think Schär's been pretty reasonable.
No, he has.
As you would say, not one of our worst players.
Yeah, well, no, he has. Schär has been, but I think we're at the point where he needs to be a backup centre-back. I understand at the moment that he would probably not be starting if Byrne or Botman were fit, to be fair. But equally, he's just another one that plays in the squad where that loyalty to the players is potentially starting to cost us points now. So, when Joe Linton comes on in a game where we're chasing the match, I don't think that's the right substitution. I don't think he's going to be the one who's going to start opening up the lines, scoring goals. He's been poor this season, Joe Linton. He has. And the games that you want him on are really... He probably should have come on against Chelsea if he'd been fit, to be honest. Because game where we have a lead, 2-0 lead, he can run around, cause carnage, get into their faces. But in a game where we're chasing the match, his pass is too slow, and he doesn't offer enough on the ball in those situations. So there's just a few things like that are a problem. The squad probably needs to have its probably first major overhaul in the summer, in my opinion, I think.
Well, what we're going to do about it in January anyway. Transfer window's coming up. Apparently, we've got a £45 million cash injection from the PIF. Looking at January targets, maybe some we can sell, cash in on a few fringe players. Look, I've seen a few names bandied around. People suggesting, why don't we try for, say, Joe Gomez at Liverpool, who's obviously a good defender, but his injury record is not, it's terrible. Keith Smith of AZ Alkmaar is one getting a big shout. 19, first big season in Dutch football. I know there's a lot of teams looking at him, but is that what we're looking for at the moment? There's another player called Lamine Camara at Monaco, who 22 on New Year's Day. He's currently at AFCON. He's got, I was looking him up today. He's got 36 caps already for Senegal. So
that's pretty unbelievable, isn't it, to be fair?
It is unbelievable. Even though he's young, a lot more experience, say, than Keith Smith. So what do we need to do?
Well, I think this, for one, I think the targets that we've been linked with is a sign of what Ross Wilson wants to do as sporting director. I think he's made it clear in his a couple of interviews he's done so far that he doesn't think the value is necessarily in the Premier League. And I suppose we can see that by the fact that we paid Nottingham Forest £55 million for Anthony Elanga.
He gets a bashing every time we do this show, doesn't he? And he probably deserves
when
it.
When Ross Wilson was sporting director. So he understands that better than anyone. And I think that there's a clear drive to get players like Malik Chow, which is looking like a really bargain. Sven Botman, when Newcastle first signed him for £35 million. Bruno Guimaraes, we always almost forget that we paid less than £40 million for him. He's one of our best Premier League midfielders. So
we're not going to cash in on him, are we?
No, we're not going to cash on him. But I think that this is whoever we sign, I think there's a clear change in direction in the transfer market and a switch towards looking at Europe and trying to maybe do what Brighton do, maybe do what Brentford do, and have a more data-driven approach, or just a case of not going for the tried and tested.
I can already
Premier League
hear the fans screaming at this video saying, no, we don't want a data-driven approach. We want to go out. We want to sign big players. Players are going to take us back into the Champions League again next season. Players who are going to help us win the Premier League. I don't want a Moneyball player who may give us an extra 1% when we want an extra 15%, an extra 20%.
No, it's a fair argument. But look, Shaun, we saw this in the summer when Newcastle went in for players who the other big Premier League teams wanted, and Newcastle didn't get any of them. Realistically, Brian Mbeumo did not sign Benjamin Sesko, Bajal Pedro, Liam Delap. It goes on. The list goes on. Newcastle try to be ambitious. They try to go big. And in the end, I don't think the transfer window was bad at all, but I think that it wasn't quite what it could have been. After finishing fifth in the Premier League last year, we should be in a position to have pushed on and really moved on, especially after winning that first trophy. And that was meant to be this summer, was meant to be that transformational transfer window. I remember talking about it numerous times, saying that if you get a Brian Mbeumo, you get a Dean Huijsen, say, that totally changed everything. That's immediately a player comes in and immediately improves the first 11. And that's what, Adam Cleary was talking about in the last podcast, where whoever the signing is, it probably does need to be a statement signing of like, right, he fits in. He immediately improves this starting 11 that Newcastle have available to them. So, we've been linked, again, it's quite, the transfer window so far has been quite quiet, really. I mean, as I say, Keith Smith, but apart from that, it's been, and Lamine Kamara, but there's not been too many other names so far. You would expect Newcastle to be active in January. They can't just be looking at the Premier League table at this moment in time and think, yeah, we're fine with that. And you can't really be happy with it. I know, again, it's close, but we are, each week, it's starting to get further and further away of like Newcastle having any chance of finishing in even the European places, which, given under Eddie Howe, never finished lower than 7th in a full season, would be extremely disappointing and would reflect, a poor campaign, really, from what we have become to expect. And maybe Howe's become a victim of his own success in some ways, because we have massively overachieved and we have pushed on way further than probably any of us really expected, with the fact that we can't actually spend the money that maybe we have available because of PSR. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of difficult issues going on, but they do need to invest in January. Whatever that player is, don't know. Or hopefully by the time we come on the next show, we've signed someone. But we'll have to see.
But if you had 50 million, let's say we spend 50 million in January, just throw it out there. Not necessarily the player. What for you is the position you want strengthening?
Yeah, well, I've spotted this before. I do think a backup left back's important. I understand that that's not like going to improve the starting 11 immediately, but I do think a backup left back is important. But I think the key position is actually a creative midfielder. Newcastle have done really well with a 4-3-3, where all of the midfielders kind of do the same thing. They're all good defensively. They're all relatively good going forward, but there's not that clear number 10 who's going to open up the door against teams who sit in against us, and teams who, when they take the lead, do sit in. We haven't really got that player who can open the door. So it needs to be, for me, a creative midfielder. And then I just think that would change those away games in every way. Those ones that where they sit back against us. In a home game, you might not even start this number 10, because we still win our home games playing the aggressive style that we play. But in an away game, maybe you need to have someone who's going to open the door.
In the old days, it used to be, we've got to get a 20-goal striker. It does seem to be now that creative midfielder is the thing. And of course, there's quite a lot of them about. Very, very good. We talk about it with England all the time. There's 5, 6, 7, some who might not even get in the squad, but they're not attainable for us. It's finding that person somewhere in Europe who can be that. And I'm not sure who it is, who we could get hold of at a reasonable price.
No, I know. That is, you're totally right, Shaun, and that's the thing. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens. You've got to trust the scouting department. I think Steve Nixon, as chief scout, has never let us down, really, to be honest. He always comes up with some top recruitment. He watched Malik Chow for 3 years. He watched Sven Botman for 3 years. He watched Joe Linton for a while. Yes, he probably didn't see Joe Linton as a defensive midfielder in the end, but that he did watch Joe Linton, and he watched Bruno Guimaraes for years as well. So this is a guy who knows football. He knows what he's doing. Obviously, Eddie needs to have his say as well. And the fact that Eddie has been basically de facto sporting director for, the whole of last summer, now they need to find a way of working out with Ross Wilson. And as far as I'm aware, Howe and Wilson have a really good relationship anyway. So I think in the end that will work out. And you've got to trust them with Dave Hopkinson in as CEO as well. We've had a bit of rough time off the field with, various sporting directors not working out. Darren Ailes getting ill and having to leave. So that's caused some problems. But now that's all resolved. hopefully we can start to see the return to the top recruitment that we have seen so far in the takeover.
Ridiculous one, really. But Dele Alli's not doing anything. He hasn't even got a club.
No,
You think? No, I know what you're saying.
Come on.
But I know he's had lots of problems off the field. If Eddie was an absolute super coach, maybe he could bring back the glory days for Dele Alli. Anyway, I realise that's not particularly practical. We were talking before you touched on it that we've got Burnley coming up. We've actually got a run of Burnley away, Palace home, Leeds home. I expect 9 points, 7 points minimum. Anything less than that, not good enough.
Yeah, I think you're right, Shaun. I really do think 9 points is what we need to be getting from these games, because Palace, as I think most people are called, are now starting to hit issues in terms of the injuries and the amount of games having to play is catching up on them. I mean, they did actually, to be honest, they probably shouldn't have lost to Spurs on Sunday, but equally, they are now starting to field players who they probably wouldn't necessarily want to field in the Premier League due to certainly with AFCON as well has had an impact. Munoz is injured. So Palace is a game that Newcastle should be winning at home. Burnley are a team who had an okay start, and then since then, it's the Premier League as Scott Parker again struggling in the Premier League. I don't know if he's a Premier League coach. He's had a few goes at it now. Hasn't really worked out for him. And then Leeds are actually in good form. They're Dominic Calvert-Lewin especially. He's in really good form. Since they've changed to the back three, they've really improved massively. So, but still,
we are at home against them, though. Come on, we should be expecting wins everywhere, especially Burnley. I think we'll give up if we don't get the win at Burnley.
So from the last 3 Premier League games, it was 1 point in the end, which was, we lost to Sunderland, obviously drew Chelsea and got beaten by Manchester United. And I didn't think 1 point from those was good enough. If, as you say, get anything less than 7 points from these 3, I don't know. I do think some of the noise around Eddie Howe will increase, certainly, because then you're over halfway through the season and you'll be mid-table. You'll be nowhere near. You'll probably be close to the relegation zone, actually, if you take less than 7 points from these 3 games. So they're huge.
People always talk about the noise, the noise that's being created outside the club. We're the noise, Jack. We are the people who are saying, this should happen, this is what you're making a noise. So how bad would it get to if, say, we came out of these 3 fixtures with, 3 points?
Well, I don't know. I'm obviously nowhere near in the Eddie Howe outcome at all, at all. He deserves a lot more time to turn these things around. But equally, there are concerning patterns of play that he doesn't seem to be fixing at the moment in time. The fact that we can't win a game after going behind is an issue. The fact that we can't keep a lead is also an issue. So we are winning. We've obviously won an okay amount of games this season, but it should be a lot more given the amount of times we took the lead and then just not being able to hold on. And then the fact that when we've conceded first, we've done nothing. So that concerning. I think some of the lack of creativity when we're on the ball is a massive issue as well. And these are things that need to be worked out. And as I said, he deserves time. But I think last season there was the obvious fix of Sandro Tonali coming into the team for Sean Longstaff, and then we won 9 in a row in our competitions. Okay, this year, what is the obvious fix? Because all of the players, apart from at the moment now Livramento, and I suppose you'd say Burn, the majority of the starting 11 is fit. Yes, there are injuries to the backup defenders and Tino, Livramento and Burn, but equally the rest of the team's fit. So there's no obvious fix at this moment in time, and that's what's maybe more concerning, I think, about this season so far than last year, because he's got a bigger squad, he's got players that he wanted in the positions he wanted, and at the moment we're mid-table. Yes, we're the Champions League, in the Carabao Cup semi-final, brilliant. We're doing pretty well in the Champions League as well, but in the Premier League, we've not delivered the heights that we probably should do.
But we're going to finish on a positive note, Jack, because it's our last show of the year. And if you'd given me this year, at the start of the year, I'd have gone absolutely brilliant. Get in. You're going to win the Carabao Cup. You're going to be in the semi-finals of the next one. You're going to be in the Champions League. You're going to still be doing pretty well in the Champions League going into the new year. What's not to like?
No, I know. You know what? 2025, what an incredible year as a Newcastle fan. You know, it started with that, as I said, that run of 9 wins in a row, whatever it was. Finished with getting 5th place in the Champions League, the Carabao Cup, which is the biggest thing of my life as a Newcastle fan. You know, that day, everything, you never ever forget it. And I think it's the same for everyone. And that is why I'll always be thankful to this team, to Eddie Howe, whatever, for delivering that moment for me and the fan base. And then, you know, equally, there's been some brilliant, there's been some fantastic moments over the course of 2025, some brilliant wins. We've obviously had the Alexander Isak saga, but, you know, whatever that's done with, we've managed to find Nick Waldemar, who's had a brilliant start as a Newcastle striker. And, you know, let's see what 2026 brings, but the Carabao Cup semi-final is another opportunity. I know Manchester City, our record at the Etihad is terrible, let's be fair, for the second leg. But if we can get a decent lead from the first leg, going there, you'd like to think we could be in another final, and it'd be brilliant to defend that trophy. It would be absolutely fantastic.
Yep, let's hope for a 2026 as good as 2025. I know it's quite optimistic, that, but hey, it's possible. Jack, thanks. That's all we've got time for on this week's Inside the Toon. As I say, big thanks to Jack for joining me. Make sure you join us again next time. You'll find us on the talkSPORT and talkSPORT Newcastle YouTube channels.